such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke McKenna, but today's case is the girl in the sports bag, Lyndsay Van Blanken, solved. Now, unlike most cases I do, this one does have an answer. However, the real question we want to know the answer to is why? Why did she deserve this, and why can the world be so incredibly cruel? By the way, I post so much content like this. It's my passion to tell these stories, and it would mean the world if you would subscribe and watch them and support me. Now let's get back to the story. It was 2003 in Australia, and 18-year-old Lyndsay Van Blanken was living in Sydney. Now, she was born August 26th of 1985, and she was an extremely artistic, creative type. She was more on the quiet side, and as a teenager, she was often trying different things, trying to find herself and express herself in different ways. However, as she kind of transferred into a more professional setting, she was really finding who she wanted to be. And in fact, in Australia, Disney had just opened kind of a section of their team in this location nearby, and they needed artists. And so Lyndsay decided she was going to take a chance and she was going to apply. Now, there was 300 applicants, very little chance that Lyndsay, who was a young, not a professional, would even get a chance in this company, and yet she was hired. That is how incredible her art really was. At the same time, Lyndsay also had an on-again, off-again relationship with a man named William Matheson. Now, I say relationship very loosely. It was more like hanging out and actions rather than actually a commitment of any sort. They had met at Lyndsay's mother's wedding, where he was playing in the band. And he started to approach Lyndsay, and she was of course more of a shy type, but her best friend Jocelyn was there and offered to give William their numbers. Now, within 6 months, they were inseparable, constantly going out on long late night walks, and even began to dress alike. Lyndsay started copying his more dark and kind of an artsy type style, and she was really losing her soft demeanor. Now, did this mean she was just kind of expressing herself in different ways and trying new things, or was the relationship taking over her life? Thankfully, by 2002, Lyndsay met a man who was much more mature and willing to give her what she really wanted. He was 22-year-old Brandon Leonard, and they had met online on a video game site, and it started out super innocently. They were friends, they were doing emails back and forth. He even thought she was a guy at first, and Brandon was also American, where Lyndsay was Australian. However, these two really appeared to be in love from the very beginning. She had also just landed her dream job at Disney, and it seemed like her life was on the track that she wanted it to be on. However, there was just one thing that was wrong, and that was that her on-again, off-again fling didn't know that it was over, and he really didn't get the hints. You see, in 2002, this bright young girl began to revert back to her old self. Which many believed was her true self. She stopped dressing in those dark clothes that she's been wearing previously, and she really was just coming into herself again. And her parents noticed this right away and really thought that Brandon was great for her, and they had noticed that shift in her, just her personality, her demeanor, everything, and they definitely felt a sense of relief as well. And a huge surprise awaited them too, because not only was their daughter in love, she was also engaged, because that July, Brandon had proposed to her over the internet, and she had said yes, and he then sent her an engagement ring that she began wearing all the time, and he was also planning to come and see her. September 9th, 2003, Brandon would arrive in Australia. However, before that, Lyndsay needed to break the news to William that their long-term fling was officially over. And Lyndsay and Brandon, when they met, their online connection went to in person almost immediately. It was so natural, nothing felt different than them talking online, and they were really in love in person as well as online. Just everything seemed to feel right. They felt as though they were soulmates. However, William begged to differ and really believed that Lyndsay didn't make the right choice and had never officially dumped him. Because when Lyndsay had told him that their fling was over, she didn't tell him that there was another guy in the picture, and William was not okay with this, and the fling that he never really wanted to turn into a relationship with Lyndsay, he now needed. He needed her to be only his, and most importantly, he needed Brandon not to be able to have her. Brandon began walking Lyndsay to work at Disney every single morning, and they would often see William just kind of lurking about and watching them. And one time Lyndsay even went shopping and he texted her saying, "I see you." And then one day, Brandon was actually at home while Lyndsay was at work, and William stopped over, banged on the door, and began screaming at him, saying that basically Lyndsay was cheating on him with William and that she had never dumped him and they were still dating, and Brandon knew this wasn't true and basically just ignored him, which further angered William. A month went by with William's anger never really subsiding, and then it was November 24th, and this would be the day that Lyndsay's parents would surprise the couple with $5,000 plane tickets to Seattle, where Brandon's parents lived. Not only was she ecstatic to meet Brandon's parents, but also to see the snow that she had never seen. They were to leave December 22nd, but unfortunately before then, she would go missing. Now, that same day, she went to work, and at 5:07, she texted Brandon saying, "I can't wait, I love you," talking about the trip, and then by 5:30, she was headed home. Now, Lyndsay caught her usual train to Bondi Junction, and she never really made it home after that and was not answering her phone. Brandon immediately called the police and said that Lyndsay was a home-loving person, was very happy, and always came home straight from work to see him. And surprisingly, police actually listened to what Brandon was saying that had been happening weeks prior to this, and sometimes they don't listen, and so it was very incredible that they were willing to go into this with open ears, and they really began to look at this as a murder investigation right off the bat. The search for her began in parks and lakes and everywhere around her home, and so did the questioning. The missing persons posters went up saying that Lyndsay was a Caucasian European weighing 60 kilos or 130 pounds and 165 centimeters or standing at 5'4", with blue-gray eyes, dark brown shoulder-length hair, wearing a black jacket, black t-shirt, purple pants, and knee-high US-style army boots with silver hoops and her engagement ring. Now, at this point, a coworker at Disney came forward to police saying that at lunch that day, he had seen Lyndsay outside arguing with a young man, and this man seemed very irritated. Lyndsay was very irritated, and when this coworker was given a lineup of photos to pick from, he picked William Matheson himself, which the police had heard much about beforehand. At this point, Lyndsay's sister decided to call William herself to see what exactly happened and what he knew. And William admitted to actually seeing Lyndsay get off the train at Bondi Junction and walked her home at about 6 p.m. However, once they got to Charing Cross, which was a local pub, there was an alleyway, and he said that that's where they separated and she went home, and that's the last time he saw her. Now, Lyndsay's sister thought this was really strange that she would even go past this local pub and go into this alleyway, and she thought it was even more strange when William's father chimed in while they were on the phone saying, "I didn't see any blood on his hands." Just out of nowhere. Lyndsay hadn't contacted her family or her job in 2 days. There was no sign of her, and that is when police officially brought in William for questioning, and he told them the exact same story that William had told Lyndsay's sister, except for the police noticed that there were scratches on his arms and his chest, but William said this was simply from his cats and his rats. Brandon was also questioned, and he was completely cleared, and he actually went back to the United States because they had planned this trip, and he said it was so heartbreaking to have to go back without Lyndsay, and especially not even knowing where she was. It was now December 7th with still no sign of Lyndsay. However, there was a spotting of William, and many people described him as being a prowler. He was also wearing a backpack, and so police went to just go check it out and to look inside this backpack. And what they found was kind of disturbing. They found inside plastic bags, a knife, a pickaxe, candle holders, hospital disinfectant, latex gloves, candles, and newspapers, and all that for what William claimed was for a picnic. It would be the next month, on January 10th, now 2004, that an apartment building would call for maintenance because there was a horrible smell coming from the car park downstairs and in the storage room. Now, this was an apartment on Queens Park, and this maintenance worker expected an animal. And when they found this duffel bag, a human hand fell out. It was the body of a female who had been strangled with cable ties, and this was 500 meters or less than a mile away from Lyndsay's home, and she was then officially identified by dental records and her family. Now, her family instantly knew who had done this to her, and the police kind of did as well. However, the prime suspect was now in the psychiatric unit of Prince of Wales Hospital because he had been suffering from extreme distress after they found this body. That's right, William Matherson was now in the psychiatric ward, and due to his state of schizophrenia and a suicidal state he was in, the police couldn't even talk to him. So the police had to try to collect evidence against him in other ways, and that's when his own father came forward, saying that when the news came out about her body, William said that he couldn't find his sports bag that they had previously bought when they were out shopping. And so the police searched the Matheson family home, didn't find the sports bag anywhere, but they did find articles of Lyndsay's disappearance and her death, as well as her diary and a tape recorder. And what was on this tape recorder, you may ask? Songs about Lyndsay in past tense. Now, all they needed was a direct connection to William and this sports bag. And so they called around to see what kind of stores in the area would hold this bag, and there was actually only one sold at a Rebel Sports in the area. Now, they got the time that it was purchased, and they saw that there was surveillance cameras right across the street. So they searched that footage for around the same time and found that William Matherson was in the area at that time. Now they just had to wait until he was out of the hospital. In March, he was released and questioned by police for several days, and even taken to the crime scene, and he really didn't say much at this point. But a little bit later, William would tell the police that he hears voices in his head that tell him to do bad things, but never to kill Lyndsay. May 19th, 2004, William was officially arrested, and in 2005 he was taken to trial, where the judge basically said that this murder was brutal and cruel to the extreme. William showed zero emotion during this trial and appeared almost dazed, but he was found guilty and sentenced to 20 years in prison with 18 years no parole. An interesting tidbit that I found was that William's brother had also suffered from schizophrenia and had actually committed suicide off the top floor of the Prince of Wales Hospital when William was just 9 and he was 17. But this case isn't over yet, because in 2016, workers at a building site in Randwick found a backpack, and this backpack belonged to Lyndsay and had her phone, bank card, CD player, and lace-up boots inside. However, the most disturbing part was that around this bag, 40 bones were found, 12 of which were human. They were said to have come from 11 different bodies, 2 of which being female, and before you rush to the assumption that possibly William was a serial killer, the police concluded that William would often go through junkyards and kind of pick up different skulls and stuff like that, because that's just kind of what he was interested in, and possibly he got rid of those just because they looked kind of incriminating, but they weren't. He didn't know that they were actually human bones. However, I guess we can't be 100%. After this was found, however, William refused to talk to the police about them at all. Now, I don't often do solved cases because, of course, there's not much to do in regards to the investigation and helping. However, I always do think that telling a victim's story and shedding light on what happened to them is never a bad thing. But in this case, I also wanted to talk about kind of the relationship, the signs, the manipulation, the obsession, and how I never want any of you guys to go through that. These little red flags seem like nothing at first, except for they will eventually add up, become bigger, and get to a point where you feel like you can't escape. But even at that point, I want to tell you that you can and you should. It won't get better with them, and you deserve better than this and than them. They may feel like you can't get better than them or make you feel bad about leaving, but that's on them and not you, and they should not be treating you that way. That is not normal, and that is not okay in the slightest. I will leave hotlines for any of you struggling with this down below. Just know you can get help. You are worthy of it, and you are so incredibly strong for what you're going through. It does not make you weak to be going through this. It makes you strong, and I want you to remember that, and please contact and get help if you can. And try your absolute hardest, because you deserve so much better than that. And it made me super happy that the police actually took into consideration what she'd been going through this entire time, because that's not something that always happens, and that's something that needs to change. Sorry to end it on kind of a sadder note, but I hope I did Lyndsay's story justice, and don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay.